Welcome everyone. Glad to see you on my channel. Today I will tell you about an unusual story, an amazing story about companionship and love. I wish you a pleasant audience. Alex, wait, shouted Julia to the neighbor boy and ran after him. Catch up. He ran forward. He wanted to be first. It was a very small village where a boy and a girl lived. When they were little, they spent all day long outside. No matter how hard the mother tried to get her daughter home, it didn't work. Julia, how many can you do? Look, it's dark outside. You're all smeared. Your dress is torn. Your knees are scraped. Her mother reprimanded her in the evening. Mommy, what could happen to me? If anything, Alex will always stand up for me, her daughter told her. Yeah, he'll stand up for you before he kicks your ass, the woman said. Come on, what are you saying? We're best friends forever. The girl went to the kitchen and sat down at the table. Only now she could feel how hungry she was. Come on, eat and go to bed. Her mother put a cup in front of her. And in fact, you know, when I grow up, Alex will be my husband. The girl ate what her mother gave her. Let's see. Things can change in time. Betty was raising her daughter alone. Her husband was in a car accident a couple years ago. She nursed him back to health for 6 months in hospital, but nothing could be done. Internal bleeding, and the man was gone. So the woman tried to do everything to make her daughter grow up to be a good, decent person. This summer was the last one before she had to go to school. Julia really hated it, but she realized that there was nothing she could do differently. Alex had already finished 2nd grade by this point. He was not much older than her neighbor, so her mother let her go out with him. Do you want to see the uniform I made for you? Betty asked. She wanted to distract the girl from running outside again today. Of course I do. And will there be bows? She answered. Yes, Mom nodded. The woman pulled out a bag from the chiffonier, containing a brown dress, a white apron, and 2 wide white corrugated ribbons that would make beautiful bows. When Alex sees it, he'll definitely appreciate it, Julia told her mom. She put the apron to her chest and twirled around in front of the mirror. Finally, that first September day came when the kids walked with their parents to the schoolyard. In their hands were flowers. All the girls were beautiful, with white bows, curly hair, which their mothers had twisted them at night on papers. Why do you keep turning around? Betty used to tell her because Julia couldn't stand still. I'm looking to see where Alex is. She hasn't seen him this morning. Alex, look how many girls there are, her mother sighed. Yes, I don't care about your girls. It's no fun with them at all, Julia said. I see. You should be climbing trees and jumping on fences. The woman saw that everyone went to class. When the line came to an end, the mother called her daughter home. Mom, can I go for another walk? Alex never saw me in this dress, she asked her. Come on, let's wait for him outside the house. You'll wear it for a year. You'll tear it. The mother was worried about it because she knew that her daughter could not sit still. Well, they sat down on a bench near their fence and watched the other students, also as beautiful, walking on their way home. Alex, Julia saw him. He was approaching his house, his jacket sleeve torn off, a black eye under his eye. Hi, he mumbled. What's up, just a lineup? Julia asked him. Nothing. The boy realized he was going to get a beating from his parents at home, so he prepared himself. Maybe at that moment he didn't pay attention to the girl's beautiful uniform and puffy bows, but now he didn't care about the bat. He entered his gate. Julia wandered over to her mother's house. She walked past Betty and entered her yard as well. The school days had begun. Her mother now let the girl go out for a short walk. Everything was fine at school. The girl liked everything. She grasped everything on the fly, quickly learned letters, learned to read and write. Her mother could not help but rejoice. When the 1st grade was coming to an end, all the kids were already outside. Julia, come with us. She saw Alex calling her. My mother said that until the school year is over, she won't let me go anywhere. She whispered to him and put her finger to her lips. "Come on, we won't be long. Let's go, I'll show you something." The boy pulled her with him. The girl looked once more at her house and ran after him. They came to the very edge of the river. It was very beautiful here, but the current was swift. You could only look at it. Children never went in there. "And what did you want to show me?" "I have seen it many times," wondered the girl. "A new gamekeeper has settled there on the island across the river. They say he's building a house." The neighbor boy told and showed her. "So what?" The girl didn't understand. "I want to make friends with him so that he could take us there," he said so enthusiastically that Julia could not even object to anything. "Who's going to let us go?" She shook her head. "If everything goes well, they will. Don't worry." He walked even closer to the edge of the shore, stood on his toes and looked into the distance. "Careful." Julia walked over to him. She thought he was about to fall. "Don't worry, it's okay." He turned around and smiled at the girl. After that, they went back home. Sure, Julia had gotten a scolding from her mother, but that was nothing at all now. They waited to meet the new gamekeeper so they could get to know him. And so, in the summer, when the vacation had already started, all the villagers were gathered in the clubhouse to introduce them to the new resident. They were told that this was Grandpa Stan, who would be living in his lodge on the island. "Why grandfather?" Julia whispered in Alex's ear. "I don't know," he shrugged. The man really didn't look old, but they'd been told it was Grandpa Stan. That's what everyone started calling him from then on. More than once during that summer, Stan gathered the children around him to tell them what he would do there, how to hunt, what animals were on the island. When school started again, Alex and Julia would meet near the house. They could look at the island from afar, but never see anything. They waited for a moment to ask Stan's grandfather to take them and show them what was there in the forest. "Oh, guys, how can I take you? You'd have to ask your moms for permission," he grunted when they asked him about it. "Well, let's just ask." Alex shrugged his shoulders. This year, he had finished elementary school. He was going into 5th grade, and he considered himself very mature. "Okay, I'll ask him myself," Stan promised. After that, indeed, one day Stan went into the house first to Betty's house. He confusedly began to tell her that it would be fun for the boys to combine the two in one, both as a camping trip and an educational excursion. The woman shook her head at first. She didn't want to let her daughter go because she was afraid for her, knowing what kind of character she had. But when Alex joined Stan, she couldn't resist. "Well, just watch me." She threatened her daughter with her finger. "Mommy, I promise you that everything will be fine. I won't leave Uncle Stan's side," she promised her. "Alex, if anything happens." Now she was already addressing the boy. "Aunt Betty, everything's gonna be fine," the kid promised her. Grandpa and the boys got into the boat, and in a few minutes they were almost in the middle of this noisy and turbulent river. The boat was drifting a little, but no one was afraid, for they saw how easily Stan handled the oars. And now they were on the island itself. Neither Alex nor Julia had ever been here before. A man led them along the paths. It was very interesting. The boys looked at different stumps, bushes. It was the same ordinary forest. The only unusual thing was that there was no one here. They knew what was on the island, and when they reached the huntsman's hut, it was very interesting there too. The hut was brand new. Grandfather Stan, together with Alex, gathered wood. Julia watched them. They heated the stove and the heat began to dissipate. Stan had a dog, so the guys ran out of the house and began to frolic in the clearing with the animal. "If your parents let you go, I'll take you with me next time. We'll go to set snares for birds," Stan told them. "Why?" Julia wondered. "You'll see and you'll know later," the lodge owner said quietly. From that time on, Grandpa Stan became Alex and Julia's best friend. During school days, their parents wouldn't let them go. But in the summer, they could go away and spend weeks at Stan's cabin. He taught them a lot of things during their years at school. They learned how to recognize animals by their tracks, how to orient themselves in the forest so as not to get lost, how to make a fire, and many other things. When the boys were already in high school, a big accident happened. Stan went out on a boat in the rain to go fishing, but he didn't take into account the wind and strong waves. The boat got caught in a wave, flipped over, and hit the man on the head. The current carried him far away from the village, so no one could find him for a long time. Alex and Julia stood to say goodbye to the man, and both cried because it was such a great loss for them. If for Alex Stan was just a friend, for Julia, it was more than that. The man had become more than just a friend to her. He had replaced her father. "Julia, let's go to that island," said her friend to the girl when the warm season came. "Can you handle it?" She trusted him like herself, but she was scared. "Well, if you do not believe me, you cannot go," turned away the one, because he was offended. No. Of course. Let's go." Now Julia was already 100% sure that she loved this young man. Alex had grown up. He was very handsome, tall, strong, brave. But the girl saw that he still had a friendly attitude towards her, as if she was his little sister, and so the two of them were back in Stan's gatehouse. The boards had darkened with time, but everything was exactly the same as it had been when the huntsman was alive. Alex got some wood and stoked the stove, although it was warm outside, but the house was still cozy from the warm stove. Now, while the boys were at school, they could come here. "Julia, aren't you going to go to town?" her mother asked her. Of course not. Why would you think that? The girl never intended to, or even thought about it. "Well, it's just that a lot of guys leave the villages because there's no prospect here," shrugged the woman. Beatty had been waiting a lot lately and wanted, while she was alive, to somehow arrange for her daughter. But Julia didn't even want to think about it. And when the graduating class was over and all the boys went to the dance, she was there too. But while she and her mom ironed her dress and did her hair, the girl was a little late. And when she came to the set, she saw that Alex was dancing with another girl. Something immediately prickled in her heart. Julia experienced such a moral pain that it seemed physical. The girl dropped everything. She ran back home. There she shut herself in her room and just cried. "Julia, open the door." "What happened?" "Nothing, Mom. I'll go to town," said her daughter to her. The woman, not understanding anything, went to the kitchen, made tea, sat on a chair, looked out the window. In the morning, when the daughter woke up and came out for breakfast, Betty started this conversation again. "Tell me what happened," she asked her daughter calmly. I loved him so much. I was ready for him, for everything. And he, with this Mashka." Julia began to sob because she was very offended. "Daughter, you found something to worry about," her mother stroked her head with her hand. "We've been together since childhood," I thought. "We'll grow up. We'll get married. We'll have a strong family." The girl was sobbing. "My dear, everything will be fine. You will now go to the city. There you will settle down and forget about your Alex." The woman smiled and thought to herself that there was no happiness, but misfortune helped. She wanted so much for her daughter to get away from here and not live like her. Julia packed her bags. She said goodbye to her mom and no one else. She did one more thing. She ran to the river and said goodbye to it, to the island, to the shore, realizing that she would probably never come back here again. She wanted to say goodbye to Alex, but her pride wouldn't let her do it. Julia stood at the station. Her mother held her close. "Daughter, everything will work out for you. Don't worry," the woman told her. "Mom, as soon as I get settled, I'll take you away from here," she promised the woman. "Good, you don't have to worry about me." Betty didn't want the girl to think about her. The girl arrived, looked around. She didn't know what to do. The first thing she did was to go to the local college to enroll there, because there was nowhere to live, and they provided a dormitory. It was advised to her by her mom's friend, who once also went to the city. "Hello." She entered the dormitory building. "Good afternoon," looked at her in a friendly way by the woman who was sitting downstairs. "Can I leave my bags here at your place? I came to enroll, but with luggage is not comfortable at all," smiled the girl. Of course, allowed her to do so. Everything went very well, even better than what Julia had planned. She got into her first year of college. She was offered to go to work at the factory after she had studied for 1 year, to transfer to evening classes, and to live in a dormitory. "I agreed," the girl said then. She realized that she would immediately have both education and the income she would receive at work, and a place to live. But it only seemed easy in words. Julia entered the room where she was going to live for who knows how long. There were already 2 girls there. Now, while they were all studying and not working, they all lived together, and after that, many started families which were given separate apartments in the same dormitory. "Come in. Don't be shy. Make yourself at home," her new acquaintances told her. Maddie and Katie had been living here for a year. They showed and told the newcomer everything. Julia, at first sight, it seemed that everything was fine and she would cope with everything. Studying began, notes, lectures, sessions, one thing after another. Katie, along with Maddie, were always giggling, whispering all the talk was about boys. "Julia, why aren't you with us today?" The girls wore very short skirts and lipstick. "My God, have you seen what you look like?" she asked them. Oh, she was right. They didn't want to listen to her. After that, the girls left. Julia stayed home. She too would not mind to meet someone, but not like her roommates. The girl was studying. She didn't want to let herself or her mom down. The year passed very quickly, followed by the second. In the summer, Julia wanted to go to her village, but when she called her mom, she told her that everyone had left and there was nothing to do there, and the pain of Alexa had not passed yet, so the girl did not go anywhere. After the first year of training, as promised, they gave her a place at the factory. It became a little bit harder because in the morning it was necessary to go to work. After that, a few hours of rest and the study began. And one day, when Julia was leaving the factory, a young man approached her. "Hello," caught up with her. "Hello," she turned around. "I've been watching you for a long time. You're always so serious. You don't go anywhere. Work, home, study." He listed to her, as if he was watching her and knew what she was doing. "Why would you say that?" "When I have to. I go to the movies." She wanted to add something else, but then decided not to, because this was a complete stranger. Someone she wanted nothing to do with. "Mickey." He smiled at her. "Good," she went on, and didn't introduce herself. "You don't want to tell me your name?" he asked her. "Why?" She didn't understand it. "Well, I don't know. If we had met together sometime, we would have gone to the movies." He was walking next to her. "I'm fine without meeting you." She turned away, realizing that she only had an hour and a half to rest before studying. "And I know your name." He overtook her a little. "I congratulate you." There was nothing more to say to the girl. "Julia, why don't you want to chat?" He didn't understand. "Just, I do not have time. From morning work, then study, and need to leave time to sleep," she said, with all seriousness. Oh, how businesslike we are." He spread his hands apart and sycophantically. The girl quickened her step. She didn't feel like talking to him at all, nor walking beside him, nor going to the movies or doing anything else. That day she came home, rested, went to study. She never remembered the young man again. But not 2 weeks later, there was some kind of holiday at the college. After that, a dance was organized. Julia almost never stayed for such events, but today, for some reason, she felt like it. She stood alone on the sidelines, watching the couples who were secluding themselves. The girls who, just like her, were standing alone. "Hi!" She heard it over her ear and flinched. Why are you scaring me like that? She turned around and saw Mickey. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you, he told her. You did, she replied. I didn't think I'd see you here today. He looked around as if searching for someone. I decided to stay for a while, to listen to music, and she didn't know what to say next. Don't be shy. It's okay. Let's go dancing. He offered it to her, and without waiting for an answer, he took her by the hands and pulled her to the middle of the hall. Julia didn't pull away because she was embarrassed by everything that was happening. She stood next to Mickey. They began to move to the music. Why did you do that? She said quietly in his ear. What did I do? Ask you to dance? He didn't understand. You dragged me here by force. I didn't resist just because others were watching, she admitted to him honestly. Oh, listen, let's dance quietly, and then I'll walk you to the dormitory if you want, Mickey offered her. So began the acquaintance of Julia and Mickey. Today he saw her off, and the next day he came with flowers, and then invited her to a movie. Julia was unapproachable, but Mickey won her heart in 5 days, bit by bit. And now the two of them were dating. Remember the way you looked at me? Mickey laughed. She didn't like to talk about it. And if I hadn't dragged you to the gym, would you have gone out with me? He was sarcastic again. Mickey, I'm going to turn around and walk away, she told him. After that, he didn't say anything to her, just took her under his arm, and they walked quietly through the streets. When summer came, Mickey suggested that Julia go to her mother's house. Why? She didn't understand. I want to move her here now, after she finishes her education. She really thought about it. And I want to go now to ask her for your hand in marriage, Mickey said. You what? She blushed. Well, what's the big deal? The young man didn't understand. Well, let's go. Julia really didn't want to, because she was afraid to meet Alex in her village, but she couldn't leave her mother because of that. They packed up, got on the train. Let's go. Beatty was very happy to meet them, but she hardly got out of bed anymore. Mommy, what's wrong? Her daughter ran up to her when she first saw her. Don't worry about me, I'm fine, she said, breathing heavily. Why didn't you tell me? Julia was worried about the woman. Come on, Mickey. Calm down your future wife, she said to the young man. Yes, indeed, Julia. Stop it. He came up behind her and took her by the shoulders. In the evening, they sat around the table. Mickey had made a formal proposal after all. He asked his mother for the girl's hand in marriage. She smiled, agreed, confirmed to her daughter that it was a good choice. Will you show me your village tonight? Mickey asked her. Of course, absolutely, Julia said. They went outside, walked for a while, and then Julia took her husband to be by the hand and led him to the place where they had gone with Alex. The river was as lush as it had ever been. She showed and told him what and where it was. How beautiful it is here, Mickey said. After visiting their mother for almost a week, the young people were going back. Mommy, now Mickey and I will get married. We will be given a separate room, and then I will take you there. Julia promised the woman. Don't think about me at all. Live on your own. Let everything go well for you. Her mother covered her eyes and said all this. They drove back to town. Everything went on as usual. They had their wedding on the appointed day, and then, just as Julia had planned, they were given a room in the dormitory they'd checked into with Mickey. Do you remember I told my mother I'd bring her here when you and I got a room? Of course, Mickey said, realizing himself what Julia was about to ask him. He looked around the room, realizing that it would be very cramped, but there was nothing to be done, and the woman was brought here to the city so that her daughter could help her. And 6 months later, Julia didn't feel well. She realized she was expecting a baby. Oh, my daughter, how happy I am. I thought I would not live to see this moment, hugged her mother. What are you saying? Everything will be fine. The girl was crying at that moment. She did not want to lose the closest and dearest person. Pregnancy went perfectly. No toxicosis. Julia did not suffer. and on the appointed day and hour, the girl had a baby. It was a healthy, rosy-cheeked boy whom they named Fedor. "Julia, I'm so glad." Mickey hugged her when they were discharged. He had bought a stroller, a crib, and he had great news. The factory was giving him an apartment. "God, my love, I can't believe it's worked out like this." Julia hugged him. Now they all moved into the apartment together. Betty was getting worse and worse every day. Her daughter and son-in-law had made her go to the hospital a couple of times. But then that didn't help either. And when Harry was almost 2 years old, the woman was gone. What happened to Julia at that moment is beyond words. She cried. She walked a lot. She mumbled something. "Sweetheart, everything will be all right." Her husband supported her in everything. When Mom was buried, they came home. Julia sat in the kitchen and looked at one point. "Tell me what's wrong," he asked her. "Why don't we buy a house in the country?" she asked him. "I don't understand." He furrowed his eyebrows. "Well, what's not to understand? I was born and lived always in the village. And now that my mom is gone, it's very hard for me. I just don't feel free here." She looked at her husband in such a way that he couldn't refuse her. Not a year and a half later, Mickey came home. He looked at his wife first seriously, then smiled. "What?" she asked him. "I have fulfilled what you wanted," he told her. "It can't be." "Are we going to live in the village now?" she asked him. "Yes, and I didn't even have to sell or change our apartment for that," the man would brag. "So we still have this living space in that one?" he said to her. Radha did not ask what happened and when. She was glad that now she would live in familiar conditions. The big move had begun when they were already in the village. Julia could not be happy. She spent all day doing something in the yard, finishing the bathhouse, everything in the house, the porch, the windows, and everything else. Mickey looked at it all and didn't realize how nice it could be here. Yes, fresh air and nature and everything, but nothing else. And the hardest part was that he had to commute to work in town every day. His wife had quit her job at the factory and now wanted to get a job somewhere here in the village. The son was small. He did not yet understand where and how they lived. Like his mother, he liked everything too. Every day he ran around in the yard. Julia sat and looked at him and remembered how she and Alex at the same age had done all sorts of things. "Why are you sad, neighbor?" A new acquaintance, whom they met when they moved in, came to her. "Yes, I remembered myself when I was young, as I also ran around my yard, and for some reason so sad." Julia shared with her. "Yes, I often remember that too," she agreed. "Did you grow up in this village?" Julia wondered. "Yes, in the same house and lived with my parents." Selina nodded to her. After that, the women sat down on the ring and started talking about life in the village. Years went by. Julia got a job at the post office, just like she wanted in this village. Everything was going great for her. Harry was going to go to first grade, and his mother was getting ready for him. Lately, the boy had become unmanageable, but Julia did not do anything because she realized that at that age, all children are like that. She tried not to scold her son, but also did not encourage such behavior. The older the child got, the more he resented the fact that they lived in the countryside. "We have an apartment in the city. Why do we live here?" He did not understand. "Son, but look, here we have our own land, our own farm, fresh air. The river is nearby," the woman said. "I know, but in the city, it seems to me, it's better anyway. Everyone rushes to the city, and we live here." He was 10 years old, but by that time he already understood everything. "I don't know. I never intended to leave the village, but circumstances were such that I had to leave it. Then I lived a few years in the city. I realized that it was not mine and asked Mickey to buy us a house here. My mother understood that it was her wish, but not her husband's and son's, and what to do about it. She didn't understand. Lately, the woman cried a lot because Mickey time after time just did not come back in the evening from work. "And where have you been again?" asked his wife to him once again. At first he said that he had slept in the apartment they had left there, but when Julia discovered that all the keys were at home, he said that he had gathered with friends and sat with them there. "Somehow I don't believe you," his wife looked at him. "If you don't want to, don't believe me," he answered her, because everything was so boring that he just wanted to wave his hand and go away, far away, far away. When Harry was in high school, he told his mother every day that as soon as school was over, he would pack his bags and go to the city. There was nothing for him to do here at all. Julia cried, but did not persuade her son. Everyone has his own life, so a person lives it as he can. Somehow her husband was away for almost the whole week, and only on the weekend he came. Julia thought she was going to give him a big scandal, but as soon as he walked through the door, she realized everything. "Are you getting your things?" she asked him from the doorstep. "How did you realize?" He looked at her. "Women sense a lot of things," she replied. Mickey didn't bother to explain. He went to his room, packed his things, lit the Julia, and left the house. The sun was out at that time, so there was no need to explain anything to anyone. When the guy came back, the mother was sitting in the kitchen. She was just sobbing. "What happened?" he asked her calmly. "Your father left. He has another woman in town," Julia said simply. "How could that be?" Sat down across from her Harry. "That's what happens in life. You live, you love a man, you do everything for him, and he just leaves you and goes away," the woman replied. Mickey did what an honest man would do. He divorced Julia and left her and her son both the apartment and the house. Now, the woman realized that not even a year later her son would leave her. She also realized that she would be alone, and that frightened her. She lived here, and she could manage on her own. Only loneliness was scary. "Mom, don't be so sad. Come with me," Harry told her when he was leaving after graduation. "No, son, go alone. But don't forget your mother. Come." She remembered now how she had left and hadn't been home for a long time. Mother must have been bored alone. That's why she was sick. Tears came to her eyes, but the woman suppressed them. Her son had left, and she was alone. Now the woman didn't know what to do at all. Yes, she went to work, but it was not enough, because the working day was only until lunchtime, and then she came home and started working here. Took care of the cattle. Everything was fine. She didn't think about anything, but the evening was the most difficult. The hours dragged on endlessly. Nothing helped. "Julia, stop sitting there by the window. Come with us." One day her neighbor Selina called her. "Where to?" She didn't understand. Where? "To the club," called her friend. "And what are we going to do there?" Julia was very surprised, because she knew that the club has not been working for a long time. "We have our own association there. We sing together, knit together, do different things. It's like a hobby club," her neighbor answered her. "I see," Julia nodded her head. She didn't go with Selina that evening. And then she thought, why can't I do what I want to do? Live not for someone else, but for myself. I'll go to this club. What if I meet someone? So she decided, and from the next day she started meeting everyone together. "So, come on, tell us your story." Sat around her other women. "I was born and lived in the village. Everything was fine. Then the devil forced me to go to this city. There at the factory I met my future husband, had a child, a son, but you all know about it." Julia told her story. "Well, don't be sad. What if you take and go to the place where you were born? Remember how everything was. Visit familiar places. Energize yourself with the energy that is there," one of the women advised her. And after this advice, Julia could neither sleep nor eat. She kept thinking how she could get back to her place where she used to live. Her son was studying. She had to send him money all the time. She was also helping him pay his rent, and no matter how much Julia tried to save, she couldn't. It was either not enough money or circumstances. Harry didn't come at all. So when he finished his freshman year, her mother decided to go to see him herself. She came, saw that the guy lives in the apartment. Everything is neat. Everything is cleaned up, prepared. She wasn't worried about him. "Why don't you come to my place at all, son?" she asked him. "Mom, I'm still studying, working part-time. I have no time at all," he told her. But it is not known whether it was true or not, because he continued to ask his mother for money. Julia returned to the village. She came to the club again, sat down with her friends, and began to tell them all about her son and her husband. They used to think that the husband was working in the town where the son now lived. But now, when they found out, they were shocked at what was going on in the woman's family. When it was New Year's Eve, Harry came to visit his mother. "Oh, son, she was busy with the house because she wasn't expecting anyone. Why are you here unannounced?" "She was cutting something, cleaning something, pouring water, putting it on the stove." "Mom, do not worry so much that I cannot come to my mother New Year's Eve to celebrate together." "Of course you can. I'm not saying anything. She did everything and sat down at the table to catch her breath. And I came to tell you that I met a girl and I want to ask your permission." "Can she also live in our apartment?" asked the son. His mother was even surprised that Harry had decided to ask her permission. He usually did everything himself. "Of course, son, what talk? Live, yes. If you had not asked, I would not have known that you were there together." But on the other hand, the woman was happy that he came to her to warn her, to tell her about it. They had celebrated New Year's Eve together. Although Julia was expected at the club, she didn't go there because spending time with her son was more important to her than the girlfriend she met every day. On the 1st of January, when they woke up, Harry went out to the yard to fix something, somewhere. He nailed a board here, nailed a board there, sawed off a piece of wood, helped chop it, and put it in a stack. Julia just looked at him and was glad that she had such a good and grown-up son. She thought that now, if they were to live together with the girl, she would try to help them in any way she could. She was telling the girls about her village, where she used to live. "I want to go there very much," she told Harry about it, and she realized that now he could not help her, but maybe in the future, when she goes to work, something will work out. "Well, Mother, you know how far it is. If it weren't for that, you could just get on a train and go," Harry told her. "Yes, of course I know how far it is, and I don't say anything. I don't ask anyone for anything, but it would be wonderful to be in those places," Julia said dreamily. It was evident to Harry that he had to go away, but was ashamed to admit it to his mother. So she told him that his friends were probably waiting for him in town. He thanked her for her wisdom, packed everything he had brought with him, and was about to leave the house. "Harry, wait." His mom caught up with him. She was holding some paper in her hands. When she unfolded it, the young man saw that there was money inside. "Here, take a little here. But it's enough for the first time." His mother always tried to help her only son in everything. "Thank you," he never refused and took money from the woman. "If you have a weekend, come visit with a girl," his mother invited him. "Okay," he promised her. After that, she would meet her friends again at the club. Ahead were the Christmas holidays, which also had to be celebrated in their own way. But Julia did not fail to brag to her friends that her son had come to visit her, that he had found a girl, and that everything was going to be fine. "Oh, Julia, you do a lot for your child. He gives you nothing in return. And you... Look how much you've done for him with money and apartment and everything else," Selena warned her. "What? It can be worse like this. And where am I with this money? It's better to help young people than to spoil all my life," sighed the woman, although she realized that if she had saved money for a year, she would have enough for the trip and for food and everything else. "Yes, first we spoil them, and then we complain that no one comes to see us, and no one remembers us," sighed another neighbor. But Julia didn't think about that now. She believed that on May holidays or in early summer, her son and his girlfriend would come to her house, help her in the vegetable garden, paint the fence, shutters on the windows, and everything else. The woman had not thought about her husband for a long time because she had learned from her son that he had married someone else and did not want to know anyone from his past life. And recently she had been told that Mickey had left town for somewhere else, and where he was now, and what he was now, and what he was doing. She didn't know at all. Yeah, she didn't need that now. Now, if her son decided to propose to his girlfriend, then maybe in a year they would have a wedding. And if that was the case, then she would need to save money not for some business trips, but for the wedding. Julia started saving all the money she had left. She received a salary, practically did not spend it anywhere, tried to have it when the young asked for it. Then she got chickens, started selling eggs and meat. It took a lot of money to travel, but it didn't bother the woman. She was trying for her blood. "Julia, when will you come to us?" shouted across the street to her neighbor. No time yet, the woman thought. She really hadn't been to the club for a long time. "You give all of yourself to your son. And where is he? Look how the gates have swayed," Selena told her. "Nothing. He'll be here soon," her mother believed. And indeed, when summer came, the son and his girlfriend were here. "Hello, my family," Julia hugged the children. Even though she didn't know the girl, she already loved her because her son had chosen her. "Hello," she said modestly. They entered the house. Julia was waiting for them, so she cooked. On the table was almost all her own meat, vegetables, and other things. "Why so much?" Harry looked at the table and then at his mother. "You better introduce me to your fiancé," the woman interrupted him. "Ah, yes, this is Angelica," the young man introduced the girl. "It will be necessary to go to the club in the evening," said the lady of the house. "And what do you have there, Disco?" the girl chirped. "Aha, there are no discos there for many years. Everyone leaves," Harry told her and laughed. "What are we going to do there then?" It was obvious that Angelica was not timid. "I have friends there. I want to introduce you to them." Julia thought that everyone knew her son. Now it is necessary to recognize her daughter-in-law. "I don't want to go to any club," the girl wrinkled her nose. "Angelica." Harry knew his fiancée was a real piece of work. "Really, what am I going to do there?" She looked at Harry, and she wasn't ashamed that he wasn't the only one here. "Okay, you don't want to go. Don't go. Do you want me to invite everyone here?" Julia asked. She didn't even pay attention to the fact that the girl was acting like this. "Okay, Mom. Let's do it here," her son agreed with her. The woman invited all her acquaintances that same day. She so wanted them to see how her son had become and what a beautiful bride he had. When the woman returned home, she began to make the arrangements. "Angelica, why don't you give me a hand and let Harry heat the bath?" Julia asked her future daughter-in-law. "No, why should I?" She glared at the young man. "Why are you acting like this?" He didn't understand because she was a little different at home. "Okay," got up. Angelica stood up and started doing what Julia told her to do. Harry went outside. To be honest, he didn't need all of this either. He and Angelica had decided to apply, and to do that, he had to be sure his mother would give him money. That's what they'd come for. And if now he would start talking about it at once and do nothing, everything would become clear at once. Toward evening, the guests began to arrive. The tables were bursting with food, but everything was simple: pickles, jam, his own twists, mushrooms, and other things. Potatoes, baked chickens, and goose. He was the main treat on the table. "Well, my dear guests, I want to raise a glass to my son and his chosen one." Julia got up from her seat. She was so tired during the day that she had no strength at all. But the woman realized that she could not fall in the mud and will do everything to make the guests leave satisfied. Mom, and we came for a reason, stood up from his seat son. He decided that this was the best chance to say everything here in front of the guests. Then his mother would be pleased, and everyone else. Sure to speak, Julia looked at her son with big eyes. She realized that every time he came to visit, he asked for money, but she didn't think he would do it in front of everyone. Angelica and I got ready to apply. I was a guest at her house. made an offer, everything as it should be. The young man began to tell. "And why didn't you call your mother?" asked someone at the table. "I," confused Guy, "I do not know. I did not think." Julia at this point saw that her son was confused and decided to distract everyone from this conversation. "How he called me only earlier. I just did not go myself," the woman said, and her eyes were very sad. "Okay, let's toast the future newlyweds," said the neighbor who was sitting next to Julia. Everyone sat, drank, and ate. At the end, Harry went to see the guests off, and Angelica was very tired. She had already gone to the bath, and now she was lying in bed. "Harry, sit a little with me." At this moment, Julia was washing dishes. In the kitchen, everything was in basins and water. Wanting to go to Angelica, he realized he would have to help, which he so didn't want to do. "Well, okay, just wanted to talk." Julia hadn't thought to involve Harry in the work. Okay rolled up his sleeves, grabbed a few plates, and started washing her up. "When are you going home?" Mother asked. "Tomorrow." Didn't hide anything from her, the guy said. "I see. I thought at least 3 days," upset Mom. "Well, that's the way it is," shook his head Harry. "Okay, if you can't, then at least that's how it is." Didn't argue with her son Mother. It was as if she was afraid to say an extra word so as not to offend anyone. The next day, when the young people were gathered, the mother called her son into the room. "Here, this is for your wedding. I've been saving since you told me about Angelique." She again gave him an impressive sum. "Thank you. What would I do without your support?" Harry hugged his mother and rejoiced. "Okay, right when the wedding is. I'll be there." She smiled and waved to the youngsters in her wake. Julia assumed that if they had already applied, the wedding would be around midsummer. She would go back to work, sell her products, do all the housework, and go out with her girlfriend. "Have you seen what a daughter-in-law is like?" Selena asked. "What did you see?" Julia didn't understand. "Oh, and you did not see?" Squinted at her neighbor. "No, why?" Julia was even more interested. "Cheeky squirrel. Probably does nothing at home. All on Harry." They began to argue. "All right. Enough. Let's not talk about anyone behind their backs, Squirrel." So Squirrel remembered how Angelica did not want to go to meet women. Maybe her friend was right. Then everything was as usual. The village was quiet. There were practically no young people left. But still people lived here. Holidays were held. No one sat idle. "Julia, I think your son has written to you." A colleague gave her a letter. Oh, what a joy. She took the envelope in her hands. "Yes, joy, it's less than half an hour away, and he writes letters," the woman said. "Come on, at least he remembered his mother." Julia waved her away. "That's it. I'm out of it." As you know, withdrew her colleague from her. The son wrote to his mother about the date of their wedding, the address, where to come. Julia rejoiced. She realized that now the son is getting married, and then will go grandchildren who will be very good in the village. "Selena, there is a dress. I have nothing at all, only old, so do not fit already." Julia came running to her neighbor and friend. "Let's see." She opened the closet, but she had nothing for the wedding. So the friends went to the club to consult with the others about what to do. A whole concilium was assembled. One promised to give beads, another earrings, and the third brought a couple of dresses. They were really beautiful. Julia tried them all on. Now all that was left was to do her hair, and she would look very good. "Thank you, girls." The woman was going home. "It's okay, that's why we all live here together, to help each other." Selena got up and followed her. Now all that was left to do was wait for the day she would go into town. Julia, so as not to embarrass Harry, decided that she would go right on the day of the gala. She thought long and hard about what to give the young people. They had everything in the apartment, and others will probably give something. Then the mother decided to help the children with money. She asked her friend to borrow a little on the day of the wedding. Selina saw her off. Julia arrived. Immediately went to the registry office. Some of the guests were already there. Soon the young ones arrived as well. Harry and Angelica were very beautiful. The young man did not scrimp, of course. His mother helped him quite well, and the bride's parents added. Everything was to take place in a restaurant. New relatives, friends. Everything went very well and fun. The woman came up, she kissed her son, she cried. It seemed that recently she herself was still a bride, and now she was sending her son into adulthood. Hello, Julia, Angelica's mother came up to her. Good afternoon, she blushed, because she was not yet familiar with her new relative. You're coming to see us today, she didn't ask, but said Tara. That was the woman's name. Good, and I did not want to interfere with the young. Still was ashamed of the mother of the groom. She herself did not know why. Then it was agreed. The sister-in-law immediately moved away from her. After that, the feast went on. Julia sat at the table and was bored. Now, for some reason, she remembered Mickey. Why hadn't he come to the wedding? Her son had said he had invited him, but her thoughts were interrupted by Harry. Do you miss him? He sat down next to his mother. No, I'm fine, she smiled tiredly. Somehow, right now, the fatigue that had been building up on her was showing. But she couldn't go anywhere. She had to wait for the bride's parents. When they were ready to go, Julia got into the car. They arrived at the matchmaker's apartment. The place was nothing like the woman herself. Julia spent some of the night. She drove to the restaurant early in the morning. The second day of the wedding was to be held there. Knew the chefs were arriving early. Helped them with everything. The guests arrived. The party started again. Harry, I should probably go home. The mother approached her son. Good. He didn't even ask why. It was frustrating. Julia went to the station. It was still almost 2 hours to the bus, but she decided to wait here than be there where no one paid attention to her. When the woman returned to the village, Selina was already waiting outside her house. She pounced on her friend with questions, but she said she was very tired and went inside. Well, tomorrow I will look in. She realized that the son again did not act as his mother did in his regard. The next day, Julia told her friend that everything had gone well. Why were you so sad then? She asked her. Just, she looked away. I see. Fedka again did not pay attention to you, she guessed. He had a lot of troubles, and guests began to justify his mother. Yes, you, as always, poor Harry. Tired, nodded the neighbor. All right, I'll go to them when things settle down, Julia said, showing that she didn't want to go on about it. I won't pry into your soul, but you'll see that they'll sit on your neck, Selina said. And okay, what can I do? I will help them. The woman has already accepted her fate. When it was about a year after the wedding, it was summer again. Julia went to the children. She had packed whole bags of home-cooked food, vegetables, and other things. And of course, she didn't forget the money. She arrived at the train station. No one met her because she was traveling unannounced. She knew where her house was, so why did she need an escort? Julia was there in 10 minutes. Who's there? She heard her sister-in-law's voice from behind the door. Angelica, hello, it's me, Julia said in reply. What are you doing here? She opened the door and looked surprised at the woman. Here I decided to come. Julia didn't know what else to say. Well, come in, the girl led her mother-in-law into the apartment. She went into the kitchen and began to take out the guests she brought. There was no daughter-in-law. The woman sat on a chair, looked at the stove, decided to put the kettle on, since the owners did not do it. What is it? Angelica came into the kitchen and looked at the table, where there were jars and everything else. Guests, Julia shrugged. She didn't understand what her sister-in-law had displeased her with. What's all this for? She went back into the room. Julia couldn't wait for Harry to come back. She wanted to talk to him. 2 hours later, the young man finally showed up. Mama? You could tell he was as surprised as his wife. And why are you so surprised? You are not coming to me. I decided to come myself, answered the mother. She was already very offended. Well, what's all this for? He pointed to the table and asked exactly the same questions as his wife. You never refused before. The woman did not understand anything. What had become of her son, who before, although he used her kindness, but always did it loyally? All right. It's all right. We'll have tea now. He put the kettle on. Harry, I need to talk to you, his wife called him from the room. I'll be right there, he told his mother, and left. After he came back, he didn't look the woman in the eye. What's the matter? Julia asked him. You see, Mom, Angelica is against having someone extra in the apartment. He did not raise his head. It was obvious that he was ashamed. Where am I going now? Did not understand the woman. I don't know. Is there no bus? He looked at his watch. To be honest, I don't know. But I think that even the train station is already closed, Julia said. Let's go. He took his mother under his arm, led her out into the hallway to get dressed. You're kicking me out, Julia realized. Mom, don't get angry. I don't want to fight with my wife, he told her. Okay, you don't need to see me off. I know where the station is. She looked at her son, but he hid his eyes. Julia arrived at the train station, which was indeed already closed. She sat down on a bench. It was good that it was summer and not so cold outside. She sat there until morning and took the first bus home. You came back so fast. Selena saw her on the street. I don't want to talk to anyone, Julia told her, and went into her yard, shutting the gate. She sat in her kitchen, looking out the window, and cried. Why did she deserve all this? Why had her son done this to her? Yes, he didn't want to fight with his wife, but there was a hotel in town. He could have put her up there. She could have done it herself. But why? Since Harry didn't want her to. Now the woman has definitely decided that she will save money for a trip to the place where she was born and lived for a long time. For weeks, Julia didn't socialize with anyone. She walked around as if she was dipped in water. She calculated everything, how much she would need for the trip. She wanted to stay where her soul had been longing to go for months. It was a considerable sum, but it didn't frighten the woman. After that incident with her son 2 years past, neither he nor her daughter-in-law did not appear in her house anymore. It is understandable. The girl does not need, and the son either did not let go, or he was ashamed. Julia, let's go. Selena came after her. Her friends saw that as soon as the woman came from her son, she became very old and gaunt. I don't want to. She shook her head. I insist, the neighbor told her. All right, the woman didn't like to argue. They went to the same club where they always had something going on. Today there was a tea party. Everyone was cheerful, talking about something. Julia was distracted too. But when they talked about her family, she was immediately upset again, almost to the point of tears. You're in no hurry to have grandchildren, one of the villagers said. Let's not talk about that, Julia asked her. What's the big deal when you were married and still no children? The woman continued. I guess the daughter-in-law doesn't want to. Julia remembered how she had ruthlessly kicked her out into the night. I see, shook almost everyone's head, supporting the woman. The matter was never brought up again. But that didn't make Julia feel any better. She spent her time alone. She had no one. A year passed. Then another. Her son never came, and her mother didn't go to see him either, because she was already afraid of what would happen there. To be honest, she was simply afraid that she would somehow negatively affect the relationship between husband and wife. Everyone in the village supported her. The villagers were moving away. 7 years had passed since the last meeting between mother and son. That was a very long time. The main thing, and Harry is not interested in how you are here. And suddenly, there is no longer you, said Selena, who was most outraged by the behavior of the young man. That's enough to remember it. It's been so many years, said Julia. Got up from the bench to go home and almost fainted. She saw that Harry, her son, was coming to the house. "What's wrong with you?" Selina looked at her, then shifted her gaze to where the woman was staring. "Son," Julia rushed over to the young man. "Mommy, hi." "Sorry I've been gone so long," they hugged. "Let's go inside quickly." She pulled him along. When they were inside, Julia started fussing, as usual, to feed and water her son. She was scared that something might have happened to him. But somehow he had come, hadn't he? "I'm here for a reason," Harry said quietly. "All right, talk to me. I'll help in any way I can, all the hard feelings forgotten at once." "I congratulate you. You're a grandmother," Harry said in a low voice, probably because he still felt guilty about his mother. "What? I don't get it." She sat down across from her son. Of course she heard everything, but she thought, what if she imagined it? "You'd become a grandmother," Harry repeated louder. "Oh, really? And when?" Julia wondered. "A couple months ago," Fedor answered. "Wow, why didn't they call and tell me?" She started to cry. "No need to worry so much." He stood up, came over, hugged his mother. "Son, why is everything like this?" She didn't understand. "Mom, let's get to the point. I came for help." He looked at the woman. "What needs to be done?" Julia was ready right now to get dressed and do whatever her son said. "I'll pay for everything." "Can't you come over every day and take the kids around?" Harry asked. "What with the kids?" She didn't understand. "We got twins, so Angelica can't manage it all, and her parents can't because they're busy," the young man said. "Okay." Was Julia agreed to everything, just to communicate with his son. They were to leave tomorrow morning, and today Julia went to the club. She gathered all her friends there and told them the good news. "You what? They will take advantage of you again and leave you with nothing, and you have to travel often." They were surprised at the dedication of the woman. "No, I have to help, because they are my grandchildren. Nothing, I will travel." Was ready for these difficulties, Julia, who for so many years just sat at home. Already in the morning, mother and son went to the city. The grandmother had to see her grandchildren for the first time. As soon as they entered the apartment, the daughter-in-law retreated. She showed with all her appearance that she did not like this meeting. But today, Julia didn't care. "Okay, Mom, here are the twins, Sam and..." Oh, they were asleep at this point. "Okay," the woman admired the babies. "Here's the feedings. Here's the diapers, all shown and told by Harry. I got it all." Julia took off her outer clothing. She went and washed her hands. Harry left where Angelica was. The woman did not know. She took care of the children. In the evening, when the son returned, he sent his mother to the station. She went home, and already in the morning she was again at the station and was on her way to her grandchildren. It went on like this for several months. The boys had already started to sit up. They were looking at their grandmother, Agukal, smiling. "And your wife does not approach them at all?" the mother asked her son. "Why, puts them to bed in the evening," said Harry. The mother saw how twitchy he was and didn't believe him that Angelica was doing anything. "All right, I'll stay out of it," Julia replied. She was enjoying it all. She hadn't noticed anything at all. Today she had heard that a scandal had broken out in the kitchen between husband and wife. She was unhappy to hear it all. And then her son came into the room. "Mom, I hate to ask this, but I have no other choice." He sat down next to her. "What happened again?" Julia didn't understand why her son was putting up with all this. "Angelica suggests that you take the children with you, and we will come to visit on weekends," he said in a low voice. "Great. I won't have to go anywhere. There will be more time for the household." It seemed that the woman was even happy about this turn of events. Right after this conversation, the woman and the young man started packing. Harry called a friend who was in a car. He promised to take them to the village. "Here are my good ones. Now everything will be different, clean air, home-cooked food. She put the children to bed. Harry had already left. "What are you?" "Freed them from everything," Selina told her when she came to visit. "It's all right. I lifted one once and there's enough strength for two," Julia answered her. Now, many women from the village with whom Julia had a good relationship came to her to help with the children. When there was more than one woman in the house, it became easy. My little ones, my grandmother carried her grandchildren around like a hen. She loved them so much that she could not speak out. At first, my parents, as promised, came every weekend, but then they came less and less often. The boys had to go to kindergarten. Grandma made arrangements and they went there. Now Julia took the children to the kindergarten every morning and picked them up in the evening. "Get some rest," Selina pitied her. "I'm not tired at all." "I'm happy to be tired," Julia smiled back. "That's what they are." The neighbor meant Sam and Richard's parents. "Maybe it's my fault that Harry grew up like this," Julia said, certain that she had raised her son wrong. "What are you talking about? I couldn't believe my friend actually thought that." "Okay, don't mention it." Julia waved it away. There was life in her house again, and it couldn't help but feel good. Now that the boys were big, she would sit them at the table in the evening, and while they drank warm milk, she would tell them about her favorite island. "What is there?" curious Sam asked. "There is a rushing river, many trees and animals, and there is also a hut," said Grandma with nostalgia. "Grandma, where are Mommy and Daddy?" Richard asked. "They will come soon. They just don't have time now," she answered them. "I miss you very much," the boy said. "It's okay. I miss you too." Grandma hugged them both. They had this relationship as if she was their mother. Everything was going well, as long as the boys went to kindergarten. They were just as tomboyish as their grandmother had been when they were little. Sam and Richard had scoured the entire village up and down. There wasn't a corner they didn't crawl into. The two little boys knew everything. "You've been at it again." Selina came to visit her neighbor. "What's wrong?" Julia couldn't keep up with them. "They took all the apples," Selina said. "Well, it's no big deal," laughed Grandma. And then Julia started getting the boys ready for school. That's when their parents showed up. "Everyone, we're taking the kids home," Angelica said sternly. "What do you mean?" Julia didn't understand. She couldn't imagine life without them. "Mom, we sold the apartment, bought a bigger one, and now we can take Sam and Richard," Harry explained to her. "I see," Julia snickered. She realized that she was going to be alone again. "You can come and visit us whenever you want," her son told her. "Thanks for that." She shook her head. When the children left, Selina saw it, immediately ran to her neighbor's house. She couldn't understand how a son could do that to his mother, especially since she wasn't young anymore. "Come on, don't think about it," Julia said sadly. "What do you mean, don't think about it?" Selina was indignant. "That's it. I don't want to talk about it," went Julia to her room. She felt so bad, as if her heart had been pulled out of her chest. "And when are you going to see them?" the neighbor asked. "I don't know," the woman said from the room. "Okay, that's it. I'm behind you," Selina said, and walked out of Julia's house. She went home. She felt sorry for the woman, too. But there was nothing she could do. All Julia had to do now was get over herself and go to herself and go to her son and daughter, in-law's house, to visit. She loved her grandchildren so much that she would do anything for them. 2 weeks after they left, she packed up and went into town. She bought presents for her grandchildren at the store and came. "Grandma." They came to her down the hallway, Harry smiling, and Angelica standing disgruntled. "Hello, my relatives," hugged them the woman. She came once, came twice, and then her sister-in-law started swinging again. Julia begged her to arrange for the boys to come to her at least for the summer, but she was unapproachable. "Why so?" "Because she does not need them too," the woman cried to her son, but he also could not do anything. Angelica did as if to spite everyone, and herself, "No, and others will not give, like a dog in the hay." But no one could change her mind. Julia came home again. She looked in her savings box. She herself did not notice for all this time how she had accumulated such a sum that it was now enough for many things. Despite everything, the woman got ready and went to her dream. She booked the tickets, went to Celine, and told her that she had finally decided to make the trip. "I'm so happy for you, at least something bright will happen in your life," said her friend and neighbor. Of course, Julia was happy too. The boys were grown up, so she could afford not to visit them this year. The bags were packed and Julia was off. She didn't know what lay ahead of her there, but she wanted it all the same. The woman arrived, so much had changed here in so many years. There were hardly any houses left in the village where Julia had once lived, and she wasn't going there. Julia approached a man at the bus station who offered tourists one or another destination. "Oh, hardly anyone goes there," he said, when he heard where the woman wanted to go. "Why don't you give it a try?" she asked the young man. "Here is the man's number. Call him. If he agrees, you'll be lucky." He started to suggest other routes to her. "No thanks. I only need to go that way." She spotted a store where you could buy everything for living in the woods. She stood it all right there, walked into the station, and asked to make a phone call. When she was allowed, she dialed the number the young man had recently given her. "Hello, I need to get to the island," Julia told the man where she wanted to go. "You're crazy, there's no one there." He was amazed at what Granny was up to. "Can you get me there?" she asked him. "Okay, where are you now?" he asked. At the bus station, she looked around. "Okay, I'll be there soon," he promised. Julia sat down on a seat in the waiting room and waited. Then a strange thought occurred to her. They hadn't even met. How would they recognize each other? But it turned out to be much easier. Who wanted to go to the island? Entered the hall of the bus station. "I did." Julia jumped up from her seat. "Well done, John." The young, strong man held out his hand to her. "Julia," she smiled and picked up her bags. "So, do you want me to take you to the island?" he asked as they walked to his car. "Yes," she nodded and smiled without stopping. "Okay, but I think you're crazy," Roma told her without turning around. "Anything is possible, but I have nothing to lose anymore. I have dreamed about this trip for years and now it's coming true," she said. John realized that she was not crazy and was reasoning quite adequately. They went somewhere. Before that, they went to the store, and Julia bought everything that she could use in the woods. Stews, groats, hunting matches, some medicines, something she had with her. As she left the store, John was surprised. "How long are you going there for?" the man asked her on the way out. "I don't know how long all this will last," he pointed to the bag. "Wow, you're desperate," he shook his head. It's okay, she was so happy to be here again. Breathing this air, you could say native. They got into the boat, everything loaded. Now they had to wait for normal weather, and only then to go. "There is no normal weather here." Julia looked at him. "What do you mean, let's wait a while?" "The waves might subside." John looked off into the distance. "No, they won't." Julia remembered Stan, who had once died here, and she felt a little sad. "Okay." John started the engine. He kept looking at the woman. He couldn't believe she wanted to live here alone for a while. "Let's go." She looked at her companion as the boat moved. Yep, he was watching the water and the waves. It reminded her of her childhood, of the first time they'd been on a boat like this with Stan. Only then it had been an ordinary boat, but now it had a motor, and its power could be felt. Overcoming the waves and the rocking, they managed to get to where Julia needed to go. "Are there animals here?" John was looking off into the distance. "I know, but I'm not afraid." The woman smiled. She was happy to be here. "Here, take this." He handed her a walkie-talkie and a flare gun, thus concerned for the safety of his passenger. "Thank you," she realized. It had been a long time since she'd been here, and a lot could happen. "Why didn't you bring a guide with you?" the man asked. He had never seen a tourist walking alone at all. "Because he's not here." She looked at the waves and indicated that it was time for him to leave, then waved her hand. "If anything, I'm always in touch. He showed Julia the walkie-talkie and turned around. Again, thank you. She smiled at him and lifted her backpack onto her back, feeling like she couldn't carry everything at once. She decided she'd better go back. She walked along the trees that didn't seem to have changed at all since her youth. She recognized every bush that Grandpa Stan had once shown them. Afterward, she turned by the broken tree that had stood there for so many years, and no one had ever broken it down or removed it. The outline of a hut showed in the distance. If it's all right, I'll be very surprised, the woman said aloud, and thought to herself, what if someone lives in it? Just some hermit came and settled in. Why, it's quiet, no one touches you, you too. It's quiet, no one touches you, you too. Got kind of creepy. Now, for the first time ever, Julia wondered why she had come here, alone. Julia walked up to the cabin. No, there couldn't be anyone here. The boards were very dark, old. The porch was a little askew. Julia pushed open the doors, stepped inside. Oh, the place was filthy. The woman swept her hand around and caught a lot of cobwebs that hung from the ceiling. She immediately thought of a general cleaning, but there was no need to do one here. She could just mop the floor and dust. Julia set her backpack down, then went back to fetch everything else. The journey didn't take her very long now. Julia felt like she was 17 again and could do anything. She walked quickly along the road. The local air seemed to give the woman strength. She had brought everything. The main thing now was to make a fire in the stove. Memories immediately flashed through her mind of her grandfather, of Alex doing this here before. She went to get wood to where Stan used to stack it. Wasn't there anyone else assigned here? She thought Grandpa Stan had worked here instead of being on his own. Julia couldn't believe her eyes. There wasn't much firewood, but still. She took a few logs, carried them into the house, took out her matches, and lit them. It didn't work the first time, but she was up to the task. The village house had the same stove. Julia had gotten used to it. Warmth began to spread through the house, just as it did when she was young. Julia got up. She fetched some water, lit the kerosene that stood in the same place as it had in Stan's time, and began to clean up. In the evening, she made herself some herbal tea and heated a stew on the stove. Here, as she ate these dishes, it seemed that nothing tasted as good as she had ever tasted. After, Julia went outside. It was just wonderful here, but also a little creepy. She had that feeling before, as soon as she thought she was alone among the trees. Nothing. A couple days and I'll get used to it. The woman heard different animals. After that, Julia went into the hut, locked herself inside, and went to bed. Perhaps it was the fresh air. She fell asleep instantly. She didn't dream anything during the night, which was a shame. She wouldn't have missed a good night's sleep. In the morning, she awoke to the cry of some bird. She opened her eyes, and for the first minute, didn't realize where she was. Good morning, she wished to herself. Julia stretched, her body pleasantly aching from the hard top knot, perhaps also from yesterday's walking. She went outside, walked through the woods for a while, picking mushrooms to roast or boil. The berries could be made into jam or simply ground up with sugar. I gathered herbs which would make a wonderful tea. Afterwards, she went back to the cabin and began to prepare breakfast. Then the woman decided to walk to the places that Grandpa Stan had once shown them. She followed the path, and when she came to the edge of the forest, she froze. The silence and sunlight created a fairy tale atmosphere. God, it's beautiful here. At this moment, Julia thought that if one were to die here, it would only be happiness. She walked a little further forward, saw a hare, and smiled. There were squirrels scurrying here and there, and the further into the forest she went, the more animals there were. After the woman walked for a while, she walked back, suddenly realizing that she had lost the path that had led her here. How come? She was confused. This had never happened before. The woman began to remember the lessons Stan had taught them, examining the trees, looking at which side of the moss, and everything else. Suddenly, The woman heard some strange sounds. It sounded like some kind of moaning coming from the thicket. "What's going on here?" Julia said aloud. Now it seemed to her that she was caught in some enchanted fairy tale or a dream from which she could not just get out. She went to where the sounds were coming from. They were getting clearer and clearer. It wasn't clear at all. Suddenly, from somewhere off to the side, the sounds became more audible. Julia walked over there, took a deep breath, and scattered the leaves. The first thing she saw there was a large she-wolf breathing heavily. You could see that her side was split open, as if some animal had attacked. Jesus both startled and amazed Julia at the same time. She didn't want to disturb the beast because it could have been dangerous, and she wouldn't have been able to help. And just as the woman took a step back, she heard the same moan from the other side. Julia looked into the bushes. There was a small hole below, and there were tiny puppies, probably the same she-wolf. "You are my good ones," Julia almost cried. She felt sorry for these little ones, who were left alone without a mother. She must have been protecting them from someone, so she hid them, and then she put herself in danger. Julia wasn't thinking. She took off her sweater, the one she was wearing, put the puppies in it, and headed towards the house, she thought. And when she saw the familiar path, she smiled. She was on the right path. "Here we are home." She let the babies out onto the floor of the gatehouse. They immediately huddled closer to the stove. "Are you cold, little ones?" Julia leaned over them. The puppies whimpered in response. She had no milk or anything else, so she melted some stew and let them sip on the liquid. They must have been very hungry, because they started chomping greedily all over the house. Julia smiled. Now she realized she wasn't alone here, and she had a sense of purpose. It had been a month. The woman was so used to being here. Her charges had grown up. John visited her a couple of times, bringing her what she asked for. "Sam, where are you going again?" She shouted into the woods when she saw an older puppy raiding someone's hole. "Richard, where are you going?" She looked the other way. Yes, she named the two most active of the 5 after her grandchildren, to soothe her heart. The other 3 were named Willie, Billy, and Dilly, like Scrooge McDuck's famous nephews. But Sam and Richard were Julia's favorites, and she knew she couldn't spend the winter here. But there was no way she could take the wolves with her. "What am I going to do with you?" She sat by the stove and looked into the eyes of the wolves that lay at her feet. The woman was going to write to John and tell him to go to a kennel to place the animals there. But then she thought that here they were at home, free, in their own woods, and their own woods, and there. They would run free, but they would be fenced in with iron mesh. So she immediately dismissed the idea. Summer passed. Julie had to go back. She called John. He couldn't get there. There was a big wave. Puppies were whimpering, not wanting to let go of their owner. "What am I going to do?" Julia said, but at some point she heard the familiar sound of a motorboat. "Run into the woods," the woman commanded the wolves. They lowered their ears, came up. She stroked and kissed each one, and then stomped so that no one would see them. Julia sat in the boat. She looked at the trees for a long time and cried, and it seemed that it was the splashes of the river remained on her face. "Well, how was the hermit's adventure?" John asked her. "Great." She pointed a finger up. "I didn't think you'd last so long there," the man said admiringly. He'd brought Julia to the station. She was going home, and she so didn't want to. Today she was actually saying goodbye to this place forever, realizing that she would not be able to come again, both for health reasons and money. It was so sad that the woman couldn't even put it into words. There was a lump in her throat that seemed to prevent her from breathing. "Goodbye," John waved to her. "If you come again, call me." "I wish I had." She brushed a tear from her cheek. Julia came to the village. She couldn't forget what had happened to her there in the wilderness. That's why Grandpa Stan loved that place so much. You just couldn't get away from it. "So how was your trip? Did you meet anyone you know?" Selina asked when she came to visit her friend. She shrugged her shoulders. She was so used to people that she didn't even want to talk to anyone. "I see, soon you won't meet anyone in our village either," the neighbor said. "I don't understand why. What could have happened in the meantime?" Julia wondered. "It turns out that we are standing here and interfering with everything. The construction of the road, the town, the houses." Selena curled her fingers. "So, now Julia didn't understand anything at all. So the administration is buying up our houses at you-know-what prices?" Made big eyes, girlfriend. "Wow. And what? And what? People sell." "Of course, everyone wants to go to the city. And here is such a chance," said Selena. "What about you?" Julia wondered. She wasn't going to sell anything. "Me neither," the neighbor nodded. "I'm not selling anything," Julia said. What an idiot. She could have bought an apartment in the city and lived happily ever after. It was the first time Selena had spoken to her like that. "Goodbye," Julia pushed her neighbor out the door. "Okay, whatever you want to do," the woman shouted. Julia was left alone in the house. She sat in the kitchen and thought about why everything in life is like this. Just when you get used to something, they take it away from you. It had always been like that for her. A week after she arrived, the woman decided to go see her son and grandchildren. She did just that. Already in the morning, Julia was standing at the station. She thought that if Angelica said something to her today, she would not react to her words. "Hello," entered the grandmother in the apartment where her most dear people lived. Hello now already the grandchildren did not run to her, considered themselves adults. "Mom, do you know that in your village are buying up houses, and even at exorbitant prices?" Harry asked the woman. "You too, I told you I'm not selling anything." She pressed her lips together. "Fine, it's your house. Do what you want with it," Harry said. Today, strangely enough, Angelica didn't say a word at all. She sat with her mother-in-law at the same table and even listened to her. Julia wondered what could have happened, but then she put it out of her mind, not being rude and fine. "Well, goodbye, my dears." The woman hugged everyone and went to her place. Everything was fine, except that Julia was very bored. The villagers were really leaving the village one by one. Only the oldest, who no longer needed any apartments in the city, stayed here. How could it be? Julia lamented when she saw the next neighbors going to the station with their suitcases or loading something into their cars. She stayed here. On New Year's Eve, her grandchildren came to visit her. It was surprising, but grandmother accepted them with open arms. A year passed, 2, 3, who only during this time did not come to grandmother to agree to sell the house. But Julia stood her ground. She wasn't going to do any of that. "Hello, Grandma." Another summer the grandchildren were at Grandma's again. "Hello, family." The woman was as hospitable as ever. They spent almost every summer here now. Julia went to the city, but not to meet her relatives, but to see a notary. She realized she wasn't forever, so she decided to sign her house over to her grandchildren. She believed that they loved the place just as much as she did, and unlike their mother, would never sell it. The boys were once again at their grandmother's house. They asked her to heat the bathhouse for them, and they brought water and wood. And while Grandma was there, Sam called Richard. "What?" He came up to him. "Look what I found." He showed him the deed to the house from his grandmother. "Wow," Richard said. "Can you imagine how much you could sell it for?" Sam was no better than his mother. Grandma would never go for that. His brother was dumbfounded. "Wouldn't we ask her what she loves most in the world?" Sam winked at Richard. "I was thinking not what, but who," the boy wondered. "No, she loves that place on the island more than anything else," Sam said. "And what are you suggesting?" Richard didn't understand him. "That's where we'll take her. Say that we want to see the place she told us so much about." He told his brother his plan. "You what?" Richard didn't like what his brother was saying. Remember, she always said she dreamed of dying there. "So that's what we're going to do, Sam." As if she didn't have a heart. "I don't even know." the twin answered him. Well, are you with me or not? The kid asked. I'll never forgive myself later, the other one said. Okay, we need to plan everything. Sam realized that if he does everything, his brother will not oppose because he is always afraid of everything. From that point on, the brothers began to think through what they would do and how they would do it. They were visiting Grandma again. Grandma, remember when you told us about the island you loved so much? Sam asked her at dinner. Yes. She shook her head and started telling us again how beautiful it was. We want to go there with you, Richard immediately joined the conversation. I thought I would never go there again. The woman looked at them, tears in her eyes. When can we do it? Sam asked. It's September. It's getting colder, but we can still go for a few days. Julia looked at the calendar. That's great. He couldn't wait to do everything, not waiting. The packing started. Julia already knew exactly what they would need and in what quantities. They were ready in 2 days. Did you tell your parents? Grandma was worried. Yes, the brothers said with certainty. Then let's go. Grandma was happy, and with such support. They traveled the distance to the place where Julia had called John. But there was another man in his place, and Julia had to explain to him again. But this time he didn't agree. Grandma, why don't we rent a boat? Sam approached her. Why? That's an idea. For a couple of days, I don't think it will be expensive.